All right. Hello, everybody. This is Naroki 5. This is the Red Pill Nation Hangout number 435. I am your host and still reasonably sane member of society, Naroki 5. There's nobody with me tonight, unfortunately. There is, for those of you who don't know, I am at, in order of size of following, BitChute, Rumble, Odyssey, MGTOW TV, Bradion, and YouTube. I am also at Facebook, Minds, Gab, MeWe, Getter, and TLB Talks. I also have a Patreon as Naroki5. The topics for tonight. Yes, I actually discovered I had my microphone turned off early this time. Topics for tonight. Topic number 1, hands-off protest looks like Astroturf. 2, both the Washington Commanders and Cleveland Guardians are going back to the original names, ? 3, the Disney section. Disney does something stupid again, this time with the movie Dying for Sex. And B, judge orders Disney to fully comply with the discovery phase of the Gina Carano lawsuit against them. 4, Piers Morgan attempts to set up Andrew Wilson in a 4v1 on a show. It did not go well for the 3 feminists and Piers Morgan. Topic number 5, situation with Karmello Anthony is getting ridiculous. And topic number 6, Rebel News is suing Canadian politicians for conspiring to violate free speech rights. Okay. Well, we have covered all of the necessary topics, so let's just dive right into topic number 1, which is the hands-off protest. Now, right off the bat, one of the things that I'm noticing specifically about the hands-off protest is the fact that there is literally, and I do mean this in a figurative sense, there's literally nobody, like there's been no follow-up. I mean, the mainstream media tried to hype this particular event up about as much as they possibly could without a whole lot of success. There were, if you were to go, say, for instance, over to Threads or Mastodon or Blue Sky, you would think that this was a massive success and that everybody stormed in to watch this event with enthusiasm and happiness and all their arms. But then again, you start to peel away the barriers. First of all, there's been zero momentum carried over from this particular event, like zero. The amount, unfortunately, I couldn't find any of the videos for it, but the amount of like literal, just on, again, keep in mind here, we're talking about the right-leaning media here, but that's neither here nor there. Like some of the signs and some of the way that some of the photos I saw of some of the way that some of the costumes that were portrayed at this event, well, yeah, they were just insane. I've literally gotten into like almost shouting and screaming matches over this. The comparisons between the Nazis or Hitler and Trump it just does not fall apart. And for the record, for anybody who's hate listening to this, no. Being familiar with what the Nazis did in the 30s does not make me a Nazi sympathizer. All right? Just like knowing what happened to Andrew Tate and being familiar with what happened to him doesn't make me a Tate sympathizer. Also, despite a lot of protests and a lot of large numbers, the way this was carried out tells me that it was probably about as spontaneous as the sun coming up in the east every morning. There was a fairly significant Astroturf feel to the event. A lot of the speakers I saw that I saw speaking online at the event, very, very strong on rhetoric, not particularly strong on what would you want me to say this? Not very strong on not very strong on actual facts. But then again, I've already done a video on this. It was called anything but the actual fact. These people cannot win on rhetoric. They were actually controlling the culture until, and I hate to say it, until Elon took over Twitter. Now they don't control the narrative anymore, and it's like, the AstroTurf stuff that they're now pulling doesn't fool anybody. I've covered this before about how there were 6 organizations, and there were suddenly all of these Tesla dealerships in all these small towns were suddenly being protested and whatever. And it was very quickly found out that these people were being bussed in. There's a very strong possibility that there were a lot of people being bussed in for this particular event. The bottom line is that the support for what Trump is doing is about as close to being overwhelming as you can possibly put it. And that is saying something. The whole thing, up to, and I'm going to throw in a bit of a personal anecdote here because, they keep claiming that Elon Musk did a Hitler salute, but you want to know what? They don't. When I posted up on Instagram photos of Democrat politicians doing the exact same thing, those particular photos lacked content, but the ones where Elon was doing it somehow didn't. Just let that sink in a little bit. Now, if there's going to be a bit of a if there's going to be, I've noticed this trend ever since, Trump became the president again. The whole situation with Donald Trump with this is that now, right, because the media no longer controls the narrative around what's going on when it comes to these protests, and people now know to look and survey the territory and to look for the buses and to look for the plants that just always, I've noticed this a few times. There just seems to be these same people that just keep showing up at every single event. They, the alts have learned how to spot these people. That is really about, I don't really have all that much to say, honestly, about this event. It was probably, it was probably one of the biggest, most AstroTurfy organized things that I have ever remembered. They made a big deal about it. The media made a big deal about it, and it just disappeared. Like, it didn't really have any kind of momentum because it was artificially propped up. And it would have had momentum, but the only problem is that the people that it was supposed to fool in regards to this aren't being fooled anymore, right? It's like, the tactics of the left just simply do not work any longer. And I can see we still have absolutely nobody joining in tonight. So what I'm going to do here is I am going to move on to the next topic, which is and this is a sports one. Now we don't usually do sports, but I think it's really important to because, like, I mean, among among the things that occurred with this is that there are several teams in the NFL and Major League Baseball, and one. Hold on a second. Sorry, I felt the sneeze coming on. In fact, I think I still feel the sneeze coming on, but I'll if I sneeze next time, I'll just sneeze on the air. There was some really pressure specifically on the Washington Redskins. Now, the logo for the Redskins is based on a chief that was in the Washington D.C. I believe it was in Washington D.C. area. The logo was designed by Native American. Native Americans really didn't have that much of an issue with it, and they tried for years to try to get this logo taken down. Now, what eventually happened is that they outrage and media pressure didn't work. But what did end up happening is that they started going to the corporate sponsors for the Washington Redskins and to a lesser extent the Cleveland Indians, and they started putting pressure on these corporate sponsors. And although I can't necessarily prove it, I got a very, very strong suspicion that, BlackRock and DEI had a lot to do with this. They inserted themselves into this discussion, and it wasn't moral outrage that did it. It was corporate and commercial pressure put on by woke corporations, Nike being one of them, that caused the Washington Redskins and then the Cleveland Indians to basically change the names of their teams. And again, nobody liked the changes, although I actually kind of like the Washington Commanders, but the Cleveland Guardians now. And they've been playing as the Washington Commanders for a couple of years now. There's been, though, with probably a lot again to do with Rumble for one, but the alternate media and Robbie Starbuck, and the fact that BlackRock cannot necessarily operate in the shadows anymore when it comes to doing this stuff, that they can't just kind of quietly pull the strings from the background and hope that nobody is going to notice. That, BlackRock was kind of forced to back off, and a lot of these corporations are also being forced to back off because, you know what, get woke, go broke. And I mean, get woke, go broke is a very justifiable thing. It's like not everything that goes woke goes broke, obviously, but I mean, it's a very justifiable term of operation to have. With BlackRock out of the way, with DEI on the way out, with these far leftist, politically correct leftist maniacs losing a lot of their institutional power, specifically losing a lot of their institutional power online, teams like the Cleveland Indians and the Cleveland Guardians, and the Washington Commanders are now free to return back to the name that they used to have. And I mean, I personally think that's really good because I mean, this also applies, strangely enough, to the city that I live in. I live in Edmonton. Edmonton had a team in had a team called the Edmonton Eskimos, and okay, Infamous, if you want to jump on board, you can. Hold on a second. I sent you a request, Roger. If you want to join in, you can. Just hold on a second here. Let me see if I can't do this. Yeah. Yeah, okay, Roger, I sent you a request. Did I send you the link? Maybe I didn't send you the link. Yes, I did send you the link. Hold on, Roger. I'm going to send it to you again. All right? There you go. Roger, I'm sending you. No, that's Mark Edworthy. Where's Roger? Where the hell is Roger? Sorry, folks. Just something came up here. Oh, there he is. Okay, Roger, I'm sending it to you again. There you go. If you want to jump on board. Sorry, nobody was nobody was available when I started out. So I'm kind of having to pick this up along the way here. Hold on a second. Sent you the link on Skype. There you go. Don't know. Okay, so getting back to the actual topic itself. Oh, okay, here we go. Roger's on board. Hello, Roger. You can demute yourself.
Hello.
Hey, Roger.
How you doing? Give me a second. I'm going to go get my stuff, and I will be back here in a minute.
Okay, well, what I'm going to do then is I'm going to just round up topics 1 and 2, and then I can have you go on for a while about the first 2 topics, and then that'll get everybody caught up.
Okay.
So, yeah. So what ended up happening is that Edmonton had a CFL team called the Edmonton Eskimos, and they were the Eskimos for the longest time. And then all of a sudden, they just randomly, out of nowhere, switched their name over to the Edmonton Elks. It was not a popular decision by any stretch of the imagination. It still isn't really a popular decision. The Edmonton Eskimos were consistently in the playoffs for years and years and years and years and years. They haven't really been particularly good over the past few years, though. Don't like the change over to the Edmonton Elks. The CFL is probably going to be a little bit more slow to respond to this issue. But I think what's probably going to happen is that the CFL Edmonton club is going to have to probably go back to the Edmonton Eskimos. Now, what's going on here with the CFL is that, I mean, again, right? It's like, like, where does it stop? Did the Chicago Blackhawks change their name? Do the Kansas City Chiefs change their name? The Kansas City Chiefs, the team that's currently one of the best teams in the NFL right now. What about the college teams? Like, where does it stop? I mean, there was even one individual at the University of Manitoba a few years ago who suggested that that they even go so far as to eliminate native iconography of professional sports teams logos. The Vancouver Canucks, for instance, have a design, by the way, by a Native American, have a orca logo for their hockey team. The Seattle Seahawks also have I believe, a logo that was designed by a Native American on their team as well. So there are teams out there. There was somebody who was saying that even that is unacceptable. So, where does it stop? Like, there is a Native American background to North America. There are many sports teams that took on the name of the local tribal affiliation of the tribe that lived inside its area, like the Florida Seminoles, for instance, right? I don't, as a Native American myself, I really don't give a damn about the names of sports teams. I think there are a lot more serious issues to be dealing with here. Again, as DEI and all of this leftist stuff starts to lose its popularity, teams are going to go back. Teams are going to go back to the original logos. I'm really looking forward to this happening. Don't know how soon it's going to happen, but I think it will. Now I'm going to check. Roger, are you back yet? Okay, I'm going to have to assume that Roger is not back yet. I pretty much talked myself out about the sports teams. What I'm going to do... Oh, wait, no, he's still not back. Okay, I'll just wait for Roger to get back here. Don't really know what else to say about this, but so what I'm going to do is I am going to move on to the next topic here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just kind of set things up, and then we will just take over as soon as Roger gets back. So just give me a second here. Okay. So I've kind of talked myself out about Disney. So, but yeah, gonna set up the initial. Roger, feel free to let me know as soon as you're in. Speak up so that I can add you in to the show. What can I possibly say about Disney that I haven't covered before? Just from the regular cinematic standpoint, you have a company that had a reputation for being a really, really bad employer, and this was pre wokeism. This is like the late 2000s. There was also there's also accusations of stealing ideas from people, which is again almost considered a rite of passage in Hollywood, and Disney was right up there. But then there was also the Epstein connection, which is something that goes back to the early 2000s. There's also been situations with Disney that of kids that have disappeared elsewhere. There's one kid that disappeared in Australia, somehow mysteriously reappeared at Disneyland of all places. But then you've got all of the stuff that's and this is something that is not necessarily well known about certain crew members and certain people disappearing off Disney Cruise Lines, who, by the way, also had a stop at Epstein's Island. Dum dum duh. Yeah, there's also that. Then, of course, you have the consistent ring of the consistent endless string of arrests that were happening at Disney Corp from people. That was almost a yearly situation. There was also the Roger. Are you back yet? There was also there was also the Rainbow Kids. There was they're inserting themselves into that Ron DeSantis "Don't Say Gay" bill. Then, of course, there's again the situation with Gina Carano, the sexualization of kids. I mean, I could just go on and on and on and on and on about Disney. The way they took certain franchises and just bastardized them to the point where they weren't even recognized. And let's not even get into the fact that they seem unable or unwilling to let Kathleen Kennedy go from Star Wars, even though there's a very, very long track record now of her interfering in projects and causing them to tank. And also, I don't even necessarily know what she had to do with Gina Carano's firing, but there's that. And now we've got this most recent stuff. And hey, Roger, there you go. We'll just pick up the Disney stuff later. What I'm going to do, Roger, is we're going to go back to. I'm just going to let you talk about the hands-off protests and the Washington Commanders and the Cleveland Guardians potentially going back to the originals before we get into the Disney stuff. So I'm going to let you have the floor for a little bit. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine. So go ahead and let's get everyone caught up on your opinions before we continue on with the Disney section, which is just probably going to go for a while.
Yeah. Now with the hands-off protests and stuff, that had to do with Musk and everything, didn't it? Where whenever he got assaulted.
I think so. Yeah. But I mean, it was nationwide, and it looked very much like a AstroTurf campaign,
Yeah.
and it looked because of the way the media was hyping it up and everything, and just like just the way it was organized and the way it just didn't seem to really catch on with anybody, despite like especially in Washington D.C., some really large numbers in Washington D.C. over this.
No, I on one of them I caught a little bit of it, and it was interesting because they said that some of the footage and the photos that were taken were people who weren't even at those rallies. Um, they actually busted the media for portraying like a rally or a group of people that were in large numbers that were supposed to be at this rally, and later on they were called out on it, and it ended up hitting the news here in the United States about it. So they're like you said with the busing and everything, they're pretty much uh, doing the same thing when it comes to what we're seeing on TV too, because um, I personally don't believe that there's that big of an outbreak on it because you'd have to be an idiot if you're living in the United States and you don't want the freaking government to have an audit done on itself. You know what I mean? That's pretty stupid. I think everybody actually, no matter what country you live in, would love to have their government audited like we are. You know. So for me, I kind of see it as ridiculous. A lot of this, I haven't seen any kind of thing going on here in Illinois when it comes to that. And if you know anything about Illinois, you know it's about as blue as it gets when it comes to Democrats and stuff. So that's something that that I just don't really believe is going on. And that second part where you're talking about the Washington Redskins
And
and
the Cleveland Indians.
Cleveland Indians going back to their names, I think that's a really good thing because I remember when they were doing that and it was ridiculous, and there was a lot of crap that was going on. I think that is, in my opinion, that's when all of this woke stuff really started kicking in. I know a lot of people like to think this is just happening and it's just recently started, but I can give you examples of where it was starting even back in the late 90s, just before 9/11, you know. Um, they were talking about sanctuary cities on television shows left and right. So yeah, I don't really believe in this whole thing about this as something new. It's like a phenomenon. It's just we weren't paying attention, um, and now people are starting to pay attention. You know, before Obama was president, everybody was really lazy when it came to politics. There wasn't too many people that really got into it. You know, but I mean, and I was guilty of it too. Don't get me wrong, I was. But as time went on, um, I actually woke up to the fact that there was some crazy shit going on, and this was before freaking Donald Trump ever came into the picture. Um, it, and I, that was also one reason why I ended up becoming an independent voter too. And it had nothing to do with Donald Trump or Obama. It had to do with the political parties, um, because in my opinion, I believe that both of them have turned radical in their own way. You can't really call the Conservative Party a conservative party anymore because they're just as radical as what the left are. And it's just a big cat and mouse fight. And they're arguing and bitching about stuff that's not even important, you know. Like, I mean, real politics has absolutely nothing to do with transgender bathrooms at all, you know. We've got an economy that frickin' is needing to be taken care of. We've got to frickin' put our government in check, make sure that they're not regulating us with things that are unconstitutional, things of that nature. You know, we don't need to be worried about frickin' who's frickin' using what bathroom, and everything. It shouldn't have even been brought into government. And now we have to deal with issues like sports teams being or having their names changed because it's not politically correct. You know, that was one of the first words they used, by the way.
Oh yeah. Well, here's the thing. It wasn't moral outrage that caused them to change. I brought this up when before you jumped on board tonight. Um, it was corporate pressure,
Mm-hmm.
specifically from woke corporations, which, of course, now when you look back at it, because BlackRock is no longer able to hide in the background like they used to. It's very, very clear that a lot of this was just being orchestrated by somebody with DEI over in BlackRock is what it looks like to me. And now that BlackRock is no longer able to like stay in the shadows, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like these sports teams are not, and a lot of the professional sports leagues are less intimidated because they know, again, just like we were talking about with topic number one, the hold on a second, the hands off protest, uh it's just a bunch of astroturf, right? And it's like, yeah, yes, it's astroturf with a lot of money involved, but it is just astroturf, right? And people are knowing better, and certain teams are like looking at us going, says, oops, yeah, we got fooled, let's go back to the original team name. And I'm pretty much all for that as well, right? I mean, I actually like the name Washington Redskins,
Mm-hmm.
you
I
know.
do.
And it got to the point, and I swear that this is no word of a lie. there was actually an academic at the University of Manitoba, which is in Canada, who even suggested that we remove native iconography off of team symbols, which would have meant that the Seattle Seahawks and the Vancouver Canucks, both of whom, by the way, had their logos designed by Native Americans, that they removed those logos off their iconography because it was offensive to Native culture. Like, it obviously didn't take off, but knowing how the far left works, they probably would have pushed this. So, do you have anything more to add, or we can get back on the topic number 3?
Yeah, I did while you was talking and stuff. I was able to pull up some information and everything. And the thing about it is when they said there was more than 1,200 locations in all 50 states, and they said by more than 150 groups. And then check these groups out. These groups are civil rights organizations, labor unions, LBGTQ, and plus advocates, and then veterans and election activists. Now, this is what I've always said when it comes to this stuff. Okay, like civil rights activists. Civil rights activists. What the hell are they doing at a protest about Donald Trump auditing auditing the government? Or labor unions. Um, labor unions are labor unions. Period is a socialist freaking group. Grouping. That's how labor unions came about being, is through socialism. But here with LBGTQ, I mean, what the hell do they have to do with any of this? You know what I mean? And what it all comes down to is one hand washes another. You know what I mean? That's how they rally together. You show up at our rallies, we show up at yours.
Well, I mean, I can remember a General Schwarzkopf who fought the first Gulf War, and Schwarzkopf was asked about gays in the military, and this was like in the early 90s, and he basically said it. He said it perfectly, right? There's going to be people in a given unit that just don't care, right? And they don't care as long as the person is going to fight for them. But there's people from areas that are not quite as tolerant or grew up in an environment that definitely, and they, to quote, and he didn't say it, but I mean, um, this is something that it was published in a report. It was like he asked this one soldier, and it's like he basically said, "No, I'm not going to ground. I'm not going to risk my life over some butt fucking faggot." Right? Pardon the language, folks. But
Yeah.
that's it. Admitting LGBTQ, especially openly, especially transgender officers. Oh my God, like Rachel Levine. Like, I mean, like, yeah, there's just people that are not going to fight for the country when you pull stuff like that. And with that, let's just get into so I laid out the foundation for Disney here. Let's get going. Let's get back into the actual. Let's get back on topic here. Now, like I said, I don't know where you actually jumped in, Roger,
I
but
was I was jumping in just as you were starting up with the Disney.
okay, so you heard the whole thing, so I don't have to repeat too much of it.
Right.
Okay, so yeah, I think you'll agree with Disney has a. I'm starting to think that Disney, like, there's basically two tacks that are going on in Hollywood right now. You've got the studios that are doubling down, and you've got the studios like Amazon, who literally fired the head of, well, they didn't fire her, but she was quietly allowed to leave, um because you know it, I mean, it didn't necessarily, like, I mean, Amazon didn't get Amazon when she got fired, and I can't remember her name. They listed off a whole bunch of projects over, say, at Amazon that didn't do particularly well. There's a couple that did. Well, then keep in mind, even Kathleen Kennedy, like the trilogy after the trilogy did make money. That was mostly over nostalgia, and the movies continued to make money all the way up at the Solo. By the way, Solo itself was not that bad of a movie. At least I didn't think it was that bad. Um, Amazon, on the other hand, uh, they fired this one. Oh, like I mean, for having also the same sort of thing happening over at Amazon, where they were continuously coming up with failure after failure, and then she didn't have as long a track record as Kathleen Kennedy, but she got fired. But I mean, yeah, Amazon acquired the rights to 007. They also had the rights to 40, the entire Warhammer universe, and in both of those cases, you had wokesters interfering with the structure or the basic tenets of I mean, Warhammer, for instance, does not lend itself. I think you'll agree. Warhammer does not lend itself to woke.
Mm-mm.
Disney, on the other hand, seems to want to double down. They just keep coming out with these bad movies, and again, and they put them up in places that they shouldn't be. And this is what happened with, and you're seeing the cover on it right now, Dying for Sex. Now, this is a movie that you would think would be on the regular Disney streaming, not on Disney Kids, but that's exactly where they put this movie. They put this movie, Dying for Sex, on Disney Kids. Just let that sink in. And the story is about this woman who is dying of cancer and whatever, and she was in a domestic situation. Her and her husband were not really getting along very well, so she leaves him and goes off and has debaucherous sexual relationships. That's the function of the movie. That is not a kids movie, but they put it up on Disney Kids. And given the track record of Disney over the past few years, I can't really say. I don't know whether it's still up or not, but I mean, it's like, yeah, this is just another stupid move on top of all of the other stupid moves, which I got into earlier. Now, the second part on this is the Gina Carano, Disney Corporation lawsuit. Disney cannot make this lawsuit disappear. They're not going to be able to drown Gina Carano in an army of lawyers and with legal paperwork, because Elon Musk is basically footing the whole bill to go after Walt Disney. So what the Disney Corporation has been doing is they've been stalling, they've been delaying, they've been filing motions. And what happened in this particular case with Gina Carano and Walt Disney is that they are in what's otherwise known as a discovery phase, where each side requests certain legal documents and paperwork to prepare the case, which is going to happen some point in the spring of 2026. And in the discovery phase, you have to turn over what with, say, the prosecution and defendants make requests, and the prosecution and defendants have to comply with the requests made on both sides. Disney Corporation has refused or has stalled or has not sent over a lot of necessary documentation. And they have been very patient with trying to get Disney to cooperate, but Disney won't cooperate. And again, if this was just some random celebrity who had a couple of $1 million, this tactic might have worked. But Gina Carano, hold on a second. Bob Iger chose, of his own free will, to start poking the bear that is Elon Musk. And Elon Musk decided, okay, you want to do that? I'm going to back Gina Carano in her lawsuit. So now the whole thing with Gina Carano is going to go to its conclusion, and there's nothing that the Disney Corporation can do about it. Even if they settle out of court, they still lose face. And it's like, you got to keep wondering, like, how many more hits Disney is going to take before, they have to do something like sell off one of their properties, like, say, sell Lucasfilm back to George Lucas at a loss, or give up the MCU to somebody else. It's like, Disney really cannot, Disney just cannot, they cannot keep pouring money down a hole, even with BlackRock backing them up. Like, there's probably bean counters over at BlackRock that are looking at what's going on with Disney and going, you know what? Like, this just cannot continue. Like, it just simply cannot continue. Like, yeah, we got a lot of money, but we don't, at what point do you just stop pouring money into something that's just losing you millions of, we've already covered, I don't know the exact numbers on Snow White. It didn't lose as much as Strange World, but the only reason it didn't lose as much as Strange World is because I suspect that they knew it was going to tank, so they didn't run the same level of publicity campaign that they ran for Strange World. Here's the thing, and this is kind of because it's not on the list tonight, but Snow White didn't even break 100 million domestically. It didn't lose 360 million like Strange World, but it lost around 300, which is just absolutely staggering. So Disney just, and I've already gotten into Zebra Kids and the Epstein connection and the way they would, and screenplay theft and the toxic work environment in their studio and the way they inserted themselves into the Ron DeSantis affair in Florida. I could go on and on and on and on. How much more can Disney do before, people just really stop going away? It's like there's not and stopping Disney cruises, stopping on Epstein Island, and people disappearing off of Disney cruises. Yeah, I could go on and on and on, but I'm going to turn it over to Roger for him to have his say. So take it away, Roger.
Well, from what I've actually found out when it comes to the Dying for Sex movie, they've turned it into a series now, and it's on FX. I didn't know that they had tried to put it on Disney. I just heard that through you. So
Disney Kids, no less.
Yeah, that's pretty messed up. I've seen some of the previews and everything about it and everything. I thought it was kind of creepy that a freaking woman with breast cancer was trying to freaking leave her husband and have sex with other men and shit. That's kind of screwed up, and that's without it even being on Disney. That's it's just creepy as it is, and then the fact that they actually tried to put it on Disney is even weirder than that. So. And when it comes to that Gina Carano, I found out that they, both her and the court, I guess, has agreed to do a protective order. They're wanting to safeguard secrets related to the Mandalorian. And I guess there's another movie out that's called Grogu or whatever.
Grogu.
They there's apparently stuff that they don't want involved with those movies that they don't want the public to know about. I think that that's kind of weird. Um, I think it's really odd that people actually do that. Like I get pissed off when I hear about about congressmen and freaking senators and everything freaking being given gag orders, and then you hear about um, people doing this protective order where you don't say anything in public about that stuff. It just irritates the hell out of me about it. I mean, even though this is a private lawsuit, I guess, but it's still it's kind of annoying when it comes down to it. Uh, I really don't have much to say about it. You know what I mean? Um, Maybe later on, if you bring this up again, I might know a little bit more about it too. So, but I do know that they were talking about uh, a public or an order to keep it quiet on those two movies.
Yeah, the one thing I will point out about this is that I mean when the internal communications were turned over, um, like yeah, there's no they were it's very clear they were trying to find some type of a basis to just so they yeah, it's not looking good. Disney's going to take a huge hit on this, and it's like wow. Like just wow. I mean, they could have just let Gina Carano. I mean, ultimately, like, here's the thing, right? They claim to be all for feminism and all sort of thing. Gina Carano is an empowered, independent woman, and the first thing she does is that when she starts thinking for herself, they throw her under the bus. The irony of that just kind of blows my mind. And with that, I am going to move on to topic number 4. I think you might. Well, I don't know whether you will like this or not, but I'm actually going to like this because there is another, not Andrew Tate, there's another guy. He goes on whatever quite frequently by the name of Andrew Wilson. And he also runs a show called The Crucible. He's very blunt. He calls a spade a spade. And I don't know whether like, I mean, when you talk about Andrew Tate, for instance, Andrew Tate has this quote unquote brand that he follows, but Andrew Tate is not a particularly good debater. Andrew Wilson, on the other hand, is a master debater, and he has gone up against some of the, like, oh, he's definitely locked it up with Destiny. And he's been on Piers Morgan before, uh, oddly enough, with Tommy Lahren and another TradCon guy, and he just absolutely tore Tommy Lahren a new one. Because again, I mean, Tommy Lahren was the one who posted that video up a couple of years ago, screaming out other men, calling them slime and scum and whatever. Um, yeah. So what ended up happening, and I don't know whether Piers Morgan planned this or not, but knowing that it is Piers Morgan kind of makes me think that it was him who did this on purpose. What Piers Morgan did is he invited Andrew Wilson on, who is a really stern. He like I mean yeah he will actually swear at women if they thinks they're being stupid, right? Like he doesn't pull his punches at all, and that really gets feminists and leftists and their allies very angry because he says the quiet part out loud right to their faces. And again, it makes for good viewing for Piers Morgan. but I'm almost thinking I can't help but think that maybe Piers Morgan either set this up, which I wouldn't put past Piers Morgan, or the studio for kind of tied Piers Morgan's hands. And what they did is they had him come on. I believe it was around transgender women in transgender men in women's sports is what it was about. But it was Andrew Wilson, three feminists, and Piers Morgan. And Andrew Wilson figured out what the lay of the land was very, very quickly. And when he figured out what the lay of the land was, what he more or less decided to do, because he's done this before, because again, media celebrities have attempted to do that. They've tried doing this with Jordan Peterson. They tried doing it with Paul Elam, Karen Strawn, with a whole bunch of other people, not necessarily in the manosphere, but they've tried doing this before, where they try to basically get a whole bunch of people who don't agree with you or him online, and they will try to all gang up on him. The only problem is, and this has been my experience when dealing with feminists or people like Destiny or whatever, is that they've got a lot of rhetoric, but they don't have a lot of facts. And when Andrew Wilson figured out that this was basically an attempt to try to make him look either A, like a bully, or B, to try to smear him and embarrass him on the Piers Morgan show, he went into blood sports mode. And I saw the highlights, and among the people that was on that panel was a woman by the name of Julie Bindel, whom at one point suggested years and years back when I first started the podcast, I did an interview with a guy by the name of Anthony, who's no longer on YouTube. And he talked about some of the misandric, man-hating comments. Like Julie Bindel is this, I believe she's an MP in Britain, and she is a full-blown feminist, and she's probably one of the architects of some of the stuff that is actually going on in Britain right now. And yeah, they tried very, very, very hard to humiliate Andrew Wilson. The only thing is, though, is that they couldn't do it because they were using ad hominem. And like the moment they started getting into ad hominem, the first thing that Andrew Wilson would do is like, do you have an actual argument? Like, if you're going to talk about me, like, that's not what the show is about. The show is about transgender men in women's sport. It's not about me. You want to talk about me? Like, that's not an actual, like, make an actual point. Like, just swearing at me and saying that I'm not a real man, or that that you feel sorry for me or whatever. I mean, that's not an actual argument. That's just a bunch of ad hominem personal insults that doesn't go anywhere. So either make your point or move on. And he did that multiple times. Despite having three feminists on, including one that was really apparently Julie Bindel, who's quite highly educated, they never even came close. Andrew Wilson came out afterwards and described what it was, and you couldn't help but I mean, he was gloating. Like, they tried really hard to try to get something up on him and couldn't do it. And although Piers Morgan didn't actively partake in the 4-on-1, in no way did he try to get in any of these women's way, but none of these women were actually able to do it. And again, don't confuse Andrew Wilson with Andrew Tate. Andrew Wilson, who is a regular on the Whatever podcast, And by the way, the Whatever podcast does not just have only fan models and porn stars. They actually they've invited many feminists on to try and debate with them. And Andrew Wilson takes them on all the time. Like it's a very he's a if you don't have anything other than rhetoric and you go at Andrew Wilson, you're not going to go you're not going to get very far, because Andrew Wilson is very familiar with all the facts. Now, do I agree with everything Andrew Wilson says and does? No. But I mean, I'm going to say that, I mean, like, if for some strange reason Tate disappears or goes away, Andrew Wilson will be the guy that steps into the gap. And there's probably another 2 or 3 guys like Wilson sitting in the background that will fill the gap afterwards. And you're going to continue to see this happen until you actually start to deal with the ongoing male problem, the problem that men are having. And I don't know again, I don't know whether Piers Morgan decided to do this himself or whether the studio put him up to it. But it was very clear what the intent was to do with Andrew Wilson, and it just backfired massively. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Roger.
Yeah, I was interested in it because it was interesting how Andrew's reaction was to it, because in my personal opinion, I believe that he was actually set up. Like it was,
he was definitely set up.
And the way that it played out, like he actually went in there and tried to be pretty level-headed at first, and then it just started escalating to the point where he just went off. And he didn't just go off on one of them; he went off on every single one of them. I mean, it was, the way he puts it, is a blood fest. Like he came out with his show before. They came out with theirs apparently, and I watched a little bit of it, and he described it as basically, he didn't even say nothing. He just showed like an image where it showed blood splattering on the way.
Yeah. He came in. It turned into blood sports with him, and it was like, yeah, he did. He tried to be reasonable, but I mean, yeah, it was a deliberate, intentional setup, which is something you have to keep in mind with a guy like Piers Morgan. Sorry.
Yeah. Andrew Wilson also said that freaking it got so bad that it was like a smorgasbord for him, like he's some kind of cannibal. He said that freaking, of all things, it's like they handed him a fork and a spoon and they put a redhead in the room. Brought in a little ginger for him. So, and I got a kick out of that. And he says, of all things, man, it was like going to an all-you-can-eat buffet. So yeah, it was pretty interesting, just the actual thing about it. But when you said that thing about debating porn stars, I kind of chuckled about that. I was like, can you really debate freaking porn stars? I mean,
well, okay. The contrary. I mean, I'm going to start sounding maybe like I'm a bit of a simp here. Some porn stars are complete freaking airheads. It's like you talk to them and it's like you hear them talk for about 5 minutes and you're like, your brain just turns off. Mm-hmm. There are others though, and the one that immediately springs to mind is one by the name of Alex Lynx, for instance, who got into porn. And she understood going into porn that once you go into it, you're into it for good. Like, you're probably not going to be able to do anything else. So you may as well just go all in and make as much money as you can out of it until you age out. And that's exactly what she did. And she's actually fairly savvy. She's got a lot of business sense, and maybe she's a little bit too lefty for my liking. But I mean, you know, she's also apparently got a, from what I've seen of her, because she actually was doing some really decent YouTube content at one point. She's maybe also got maybe a little bit too much of a temper on her, so she wouldn't do particularly well on. Well, she might do okay on Fresh and Fit. She would definitely not do particularly well on whatever, especially with Andrew Wilson going after her, because they had Lily Phillips on, the woman that got banged by 1,000 guys.
Yeah.
She did not do particularly well on did not do particularly well on whatever. Women of that ilk who try to run the usual lines of bullshit and or feminists who attempt to try to deflect the issues that men have and try to minimize them or whatever, or try to make up lies about the manosphere or whatever. They go on whatever, and this is the reason why whatever has got so many people angry, is because Andrew Wilson and even the host of the show, they when these women try to double down, they just get absolutely destroyed. And I've said this before, and I'm going to say this again specifically about the whatever show, or even Fresh and Fit. Yeah. Porn stars, Instagram models, and OnlyFans content creators, most women are not in that category. That being said, though, each of those women has got sisters, mothers, extended family, a circle of friends. They've got other women around them, and given the propensity of women to be much more susceptible to groupthink, and there has been, between Fresh and Fit, because I actually did some number crunching on this, between Fresh and Fit and whatever, if you take the average number of guests they have on each of those shows over the length of time that they've been on, which has been basically around 2020, you've got a sample size of between 350,000 to 500,000 women in extended networks beyond just the ones that actually showed up. Like, each of those women has an extended network of about 10 to 11 friends, and that there's another extended network beyond that. That is actually a very reasonable sample size to draw upon for how women in general, where they're getting their opinions. And it's like, you do run into the occasional woman on those shows that actually knows what the hell they're talking about. Overall, though, you get dogmatic feminists whose ideas absolutely get destroyed. You have women who are really in no position to be pointing fingers about morality at anybody, pointing fingers of morality at either Andrew Wilson, or I can't remember what the name of the host of the show is on whatever. And it's like, I'm seeing, and this is something that they talk about a lot in the ministry, I'm seeing a disturbing lack of accountability all the way down the line. And I'm going to turn it back over to you, Roger.
Oh yeah, when it comes to like that whole thing with porn stars and everything, there are some that are pretty intelligent. I agree with you on that, but what I find really weird though is with the work that they're in, and all of the regulations and the way that feminists especially are about sex these days, because they don't agree anymore with the ways that these days these newer feminists, they're more of a neo-feminist group compared to what the older ones are. Like they aren't about free sexual identities and stuff like that, like back in the 70s and the 80s and stuff, you know. So what's weird to me is why would these porn stars actually support a group that is against them? Because they are. They go into universities and they freaking slut shame women who are freaking porn stars, and they also um, are against prostitution and stuff of that nature. And because in Nevada, they're against it. They talk out against it all the time. And the whole thing of it is, though, the weirdest part is these porn stars support that group, and that's the one thing that's really weird to me. I don't understand why they would go and do that, you know, because um, they do it. They did it back with when Bernie Sanders was running for president with Hillary Clinton. And the reason why they said that they did it in Nevada was because they wanted to keep their health insurance. You know, I'm like, are you freaking kidding me, dude? You want to keep Obamacare? So you're going to support a freaking political group that doesn't like you, doesn't support you, and eventually wants to see everything that you do freaking crumble and burn, you know. And don't get me wrong, the conservatives are about the same way, you know. They don't agree with prostitution and freaking pornography either, but it's more prevalent with the Democrats, to where when it comes to wanting to put regulations in and stuff like that to do things of that nature, which conservatives do it too, but not to the extent that the Democrats do. They're really big on regulations and things of that nature. Um, that's the one thing about that really just trips me out, is why would they even support a political group that is against them? And I've had conversations on Jaffe's show too. Like you'll see that with a lot of people who are supposed Democrats, where they do just the dumbest thing. Like you take a look at Malcolm X, and then you take a look at freaking Martin Luther King. And Martin Luther King went the route where he joined the political party that freaking oppressed his people for all those years, and basically freaking took money from them so that they could start the NAACP. Whereas Malcolm X was the one who was against all of that. He didn't agree with joining the same political party that oppressed you for hundreds of years. And guess who got scorned because of it? It was Malcolm X. And if you listen to what Malcolm X had to say, he actually had a lot of good information, but nobody wanted to hear it back then. They started banning him from speaking in colleges and stuff of that nature, but they would just let old Martin Luther King walk up and give his speeches and everything, give him money to set up an organization for freaking black people, you know. And basically they freaking took and they just transferred power from one way into another. Like they were controlling them through freaking not slavery, but it was the Jim Crow laws, and they stopped doing that, and they just invited them into their political party, and they control them through the political party, you know, the same way, or you know what I mean. But that's kind of the same thing that I see with these women when it comes to prostitution and stuff like that. And it's just like, um, I don't think that it's just freaking men who freaking need to kind of become independent. You know what I mean? I think it's freaking women too. Like they need to learn to be really independent from themselves. Like Stop trying to portray freaking somebody who's tough and freaking uh, just a horrible person. Like, women are usually supposed to be feminine, and they're also supposed to worry about themselves as, women. Um, and just if you look at women in Hollywood, for example, they always want to take these roles on where they're horrible people that freaking do bad things and kill people or steal your money and shit like that. And then Hollywood turns around and say that these women are freaking role models and shit for young women, and that's just not that's not cool at all. I mean, that's not a role model for a female. Um, Not in my opinion, at least. It's really not a role model for a male either. I mean, you have to be violent to get freaking attention, and you're not really much of a man, to be honest. Um, I mean, that's my whole take on it when I was listening to and I really don't like talking about that stuff when it comes to politics either, because like I said earlier, it just none of that stuff really belongs in politics, and it's sad that it really is. I refer to it mostly as garbage politics, and it irritates the hell out of me having to sit and watch the news or something, because that's all they spill is just nothing but garbage politics and nothing serious. So that's all I got on it.
Yeah, actually, that is quite a bit. Yeah. Yeah, peer. I mean, it's a very complicated whole. I think I'm ready to move on to the next one here. Just give me a second.
We got Piers Morgan. No, that was actually a good show. The freaking one that he did before they came out with their show was just as bad good, because you got to see his freaking reaction before it actually came out.
Yeah, well, I mean, I saw Andrew Wilson's video on it before I went over and watched the show, and it was like looking at it, it was very, very clear they were attempting to make him look bad, and it just wasn't working. And I mean, I've done a show on my Naroki 5 live stream called Anything Other Than the Point. And this is something that I've noticed that feminists will do. You know, they will get into lots of rhetoric, and even with like most universities having a gender study department where it's like this just blows my mind, where you have feminist professors like literally trying to come up with academic reasons why feminism should continue to exist, even with that massive amount of literature to fall back on. They still, and this is something that I've noticed. I mean, I've only ever seen two feminists actually. I mean, other than say, I'll just put his photo up again here. This idiot Destiny, who's a bit of a dishonest asshole, but I mean, just a creep and a pervert to boot. I mean, other than him, I mean, I've rarely seen a feminist like do well on a 1v1 debate forum, like ever. And that's probably going to be, and I mean, what's going to happen with feminism is that feminism, and they lose these fights, and what they do is they run to corporations or to big daddy governments to run block for them. And what's going to happen is that one of these times they're going to go running to the big daddy government, and the support's just not going to be there, or the money is not going to be there. And that's when they're really going to be behind the eight ball. And I suspect that situation is going to be coming up for them sooner rather than later, because the manosphere is growing at an absolutely exponential rate right now. Like it is going, like, I mean, potentially on paper, it might even be enough of a political force next year that certain politicians, specifically on the Republican side in the US, are probably going to have to start sprinkling manosphere content into their speeches and what they're talking about in order to get the male vote in some particular places. Like that's how quickly the manosphere is growing at this point. And like they're not going to be, they can't go to the government and they can't continue. And that's basically what they were trying to do here. They went after Andrew Wilson. They didn't go after what he was talking about. And because Andrew Wilson knew what they were doing, because he's seen it happen before, especially on mainstream media, he was prepared to go blood sport. And that's exactly what he did. And with that, we're going to move on to the next topic here. This one is really interesting. This involves Karmello Anthony. I can't specifically remember the name of the person that Karmello Anthony stabbed at that particular event. Hold on a second here. Let me do Karmello. Hold on a second. Let me just take a look here. Karmello Anthony stab. I can't remember.
You're talking about the former basketball player, right?
No. The Karmello is Carmello's the guy who stabbed that track guy who stabbed that boy at a track meet.
Oh wow.
Okay, yeah, it was. Yeah, his name is Karmello Anthony, much like the basketball player. Who the hell did he? Carmello Austin Metcalf. That's who it was. It was Austin Metcalf. So Karmello Anthony stabbed Austin Metcalf. Now, what I was not actually going to cover this story particularly much, mostly because, I mean, a lot of it because there was a certain individual who comes on the show whenever I bring up a topic like this. He starts kind of making excuses for these guys. One of the things you got to understand about Karmello Anthony is that this Karmello Anthony is not ghetto. Karmello Anthony comes from a middle class, reasonably well-to-do family. The photos that I've seen of him suggest that he was trying. He from what little I've been able to deduce, this is a guy who was basically trying way too hard. And he brought a weapon to a high school track event, and he got into a confrontation with a white guy by the name of Anthony Metcalf, and it got violent, and he pulled out a knife and he stabbed the guy, and then he ran off. Now, initially, the initial reports were saying, well, it was a black teen stabbing a white guy. What ended up happening is that the Karmello Anthony's family hired a well-known race baiting lawyer who immediately started playing the race card and trying to put up this image that Karmello Anthony was somehow a poor kid from the ghetto, which of course doesn't work anymore because you have independent media who fact-check what was going on with Karmello Anthony and noticed that he wasn't ghetto. He wasn't ghetto at all. And what really, so they raised this up. And then, of course, what ended up also happening is that they put up a GoFundMe to defend Karmello Anthony, and it raised, because they played the race card, they raised $200,000 to defend Karmello Anthony in his criminal case, even though there's multiple witnesses that saw him stab this person. And what they tried to do is they tried to play Austin Metcalf off as some type of a white supremacist. And again, it would have actually worked, except for the fact that there were witnesses that clearly showed that Karmello Anthony was being the aggressor, and Karmello just pulled out the knife and stabbed the guy. And also, the way what happened when the police apprehended him, he wasn't acting all tough and ghetto. He was acting pretty scared. And again, right, what you've got here is a situation where, and remember, we were talking about women on whatever and Fresh and Fit, and about how they're not necessarily how, in fact, yeah, to a great degree, they are representative of women everywhere because of the sheer number of them that have been on the show. Metcalf is not a poor boy from the ghetto. He was in a solid middle class family. He lived out in the suburbs. He was not poor or anything. He wasn't, well, I mean, he wasn't rich either, but he wasn't poor either. And he still ended up falling into this trap. And this is something that a lot of people don't know about crime. I mean, again, like Matt Walsh said the thing out loud. Said the quiet part out loud after this event happened. You've got 14% of the population in the United States is black. That means that 7% of the total population of black males is 7% of the total population. Now, you could throw some of the girls in with that as well. But that 7% of the population in the United States comprises 40% of all violent crime. Now, I can tell you the same. It's not quite and it is only, by the way, a distinctly North American phenomenon, right? Like, you don't see these numbers happening anywhere else in the world. I mean, Africa has got a high crime rate, but then Africa's a bit of a mess. Like, a lot of Africa's a bit of a mess anyway. But I mean, there's a disproportionately large number of crimes committed by one particular group. And it's like, and it's the African American community. And and it's not racist to say that, because the crime stats back that up. Now, one of the things that is not so well known is that even in areas where there isn't a lot of crime, where the people living there are not necessarily all that poor, all that bad off, you still get, it's not as bad, but you're still getting the same skewered, disproportional representation of black males on the crime stats. It's not as bad, and there's not as many of them, but you're still seeing it. And much like what you're seeing with feminists making excuses for women, and what you were talking about with Martin Luther King versus Malcolm X. I mean, I've listened to some of Malcolm X's stuff. Mm-hmm. Malcolm X says a lot of stuff that makes a lot, that in a way makes a whole hell of a lot more sense than stuff that Martin Luther King did. Martin Luther King, by the way, was a complete fucking hedonist, right? Like, there's stories about when Martin Luther King and his entourage came to town. It was like, like there were hookers and blow and all sorts of stuff going on his tour. When Malcolm X showed up, Malcolm X was a goddamn monk. Like, Malcolm X was disciplined. And keep in mind, too, Malcolm X was ghetto. Martin Luther King, I don't think was. So, yeah, Karmello Anthony, and that is his name, Karmello Anthony, is not the sweet, innocent boy. He was a guy who got caught up in and again, this is something that keeps happening, get caught up in a bad culture, and he bought into the brand, and he tried to be really hard with somebody, Austin Metcalf, who he didn't have to be hard with, and he took it too far. And now he's probably looking at, even if he manages to score a lenient judge and he comes across as conciliatory or whatever, he's probably not going to be getting out of jail until he's well into his 30s, maybe even longer. And that's at best. And the way it's being played up in the media and the way they're trying to desperately try to pass off Austin Metcalf as some type of a racist, even though they have not produced a single iota of evidence to back up anything of what they were saying, is only making the situation worse. And again, right, you got to start to wonder, how long is it going to be before they stop pulling this woke crap? And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, it's interesting, this story, from what I've been reading here. Well, it sounds like to me the case is cut and dry. Like, they've actually got witnesses that have written out affidavits saying that he stabbed the dude, and then after they after all that, with the affidavits from the witnesses, he turns around, he goes to the police, or he tells the police, he's like, he touched me, yeah, I stabbed him. He admits to it. So it's a cut and dry case. Now, what is the thing that I'm reading here is, it's because of his age, because he's 17, he's not only going to be able to avoid the death penalty, but he's not even going to be charged with life in prison. And that's one thing that is a lot of people here in the United States issue, because even today, like, male teenagers are still considered below the adult age until 21, and whereas women becoming a full-grown adult at the age of 18. Yeah, you take into consideration, like, a good example would be what's his name? He was the boxer that beat his wife. He was a heavyweight champion too.
Mike Tyson?
Mike Tyson, yeah. Mike Tyson ended up going to prison, or was going to go to prison, but because he was under 21, they ended up putting him in juvie until he freaking served his time. A lot of people don't know that, but like, that's what they do. They do that kind of stuff. Not only is he not going to get freaking the death penalty, but he's also not going to be getting a life sentence. And that's strictly because of his age. It looks like they did a GoFundMe, like you said, and I'm kind of confused about this article too, because it says that they've got a GoFundMe for freaking him, but then it also goes on further to say that a GoFundMe started by Metcalf's father was created too, which raised $316,000. So is this, did Metcalf's father start the GoFundMe for Anthony's freaking defense? Or
I can't remember. I don't remember.
It's kind of strange. Whenever I read that, I'm kind of getting the wrong, or maybe I'm not really getting the information on that like it should be saying, because Anthony's family wrote on the page about how the narrative and all that shit, is just is just wrong and everything. And then right underneath it, it says a GoFundMe started by Metcalf's father. Meanwhile, has raised over 316,000.
Oh wow, it's gone way up then.
Yeah,
It was just around 200,000 when I checked.
uh, it's messed up. Um, Whenever maybe it's going towards the expenses of him dying or something, because of his son dying. They probably both have GoFundmes set up, and yeah, I went on to check, and they said that they were saying this on People magazine, so there ain't too many articles out about it. I went in and it was either read it on CBS News or freaking People.com, and I'm not clicking on CBS News to watch anything like this because it's going to be all woke. So I stayed away from that. And the only other option is to watch it on YouTube and Wiki. No, that's not even. Wikipedia is all about the basketball player. So that's all I got. And actually, hold up. Yeah, the one thing too I want to add about Martin Luther King, which I know is kind of a side topic, but he was also a freaking hardcore 100% socialist. You know, um, and that's one thing that a lot of people don't know about him either. He was a socialist, and that was something that really turned me off on a lot of that stuff. That because whenever I started listening to Malcolm X, a lot of things that were going on back during that time period made a lot more sense than what everybody made it out to be. And that made a lot of sense when I found out that Martin Luther King was socialist. So that's all I got on that.
Okay, well, all right, let me just timestamp this and then we will move on to the last topic here. Nice show. This is the second one. We're just going to be a little over 2 hours. Okay, hold on a second here. Let me just. Okay, this is the Canadian content, although Rumble is actually involved in this. I actually found out about this one. Um, Oddly enough, on Timcast, and I had to throw it in. Well, it's because it's Canadian content and whatever. But Chris Pavlovsky, the founder of Rumble, actually is from Toronto. He's a Canadian. Um, he paired up with hosts at Rebel News, and they put on this free speech event in Ontario. And what ended up happening is that everything seemed to be going okay at this event until a few days beforehand. All of a sudden, the owner of the event comes running forward and says that they need $40,000 additional security or they can't hold the event. Now, they did, like, Rebel News doesn't have that money, but obviously Chris Pavlovsky over at Rumble does. So Rumble foot the bill for the additional security. Now, what ended up happening after the event was done is that it was like, that is strange. So they went back to the organizer of this event and they go, what the hell's going on? And it was like, well, I'm sorry, I got a call from somebody at the armed forces telling me that sending all of these things saying that people were going to storm this event and whatever. Here's the ironic part. Antifa was aware that the event was going on, but this was being held on the outskirts of Toronto, and it wasn't anywhere near, and Antifa was participating in another event on the same day, apparently, inside the city of Toronto. Now, when they started digging, what ended up happening is that this particular venue was on land that used to belong to the Canadian Armed Forces, and in fact, technically still does. So what they did, Rebel News, did, is they started putting in freedom of information requests, which you can also do in Canada. And they got hit up with this. They got swamped with all of this information, because I don't think that the member of parliament who orchestrated this, and I can't remember her specific name at this point, but it was a female inside the Liberal caucus that did this. There was discussions about ways of stopping this event, and the conversations were very lengthy, very extensive, and went on for a very long period of time. Now, the Canadian Charter of Rights and the Canadian Constitution isn't as, how would you say, as broad-reaching as the U.S. Bill of Rights is, but it is still there. And this has been the issue, because Trudeau in particular used wiggle room clauses inside the Constitution to try to get away with some of the stuff he did, specifically to the truckers. Now, what ended up happening, though, is that, thanks again to the freedom of information requests being put out, they found out that there was a very, and they looked 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 and they looked, and they ended up pulling the same card on this event that they pulled at ICMI 2015 with the men's event at the I can't even remember what the name of the hotel was, where they started sending threats and whatever, and it was like the hotel was forced to demand that the hosts of ICMI 2015 fork out several $1,000s more for security, or they were going to have to move, and they ended up having to move. So this was a clear violation of civil rights. This was a clear attempt to shut people up. And what ended up happening is that they knew exactly who it was behind it. So Rebel News, and I don't know about all of these lawsuits that Rebel News has. I think they probably got I think they've got a very busy lawyer. But, this particular politician is now facing a lawsuit of attempting to violate the constitutional rights of a citizen of Canada. Now, Rebel News files a lot of lawsuits. However, I never hear about any of these lawsuits ever going to court. So I don't know what is going on here. I think this was potentially, and what you're talking about the right here, a publicity stunt being done by the right, but it was a free speech event that they were at. Photos up here right now. This was a free speech event put on by Rumble and Rebel News. And as you can clearly see, they had Donald Trump Jr. there, and I don't know who that woman in the pink is, but she's got a nice rack. They had Glenn Greenwald, and they had Viva Fry. So they had a fairly eclectic group of individuals sitting on this panel. And it wasn't like they were talking. It's not like they were going to be engaged in hate speech. I don't know if that was Chaya Rachik. I don't know who that woman in the pink was. If somebody knows who that woman in the pink is, third from left, by all means, send me a message. Donald Trump Jr., Glenn Greenwald, Viva Fry. This is not a hate speech event. And by the way, that I think it's Bill C-11 or whatever that they were attempting to pass, it's been put off until after the election. So that bill doesn't apply here because it's still, they have to start all over again with that particular piece of legislation. Very pathetic. However, I'm going to point out that given the current path that Canada is on, it wouldn't surprise me if, especially if Mark Carney wins, and that is a very significant if at this point, this could get very, very ugly and uncomfortable to be in Canada in any capacity. And yeah, that's really all I got to say on this, and I will turn it over to Roger to take this show out.
Well, I mean, you said Antifa was there. Were they supporting?
Antifa was in Toronto, but they weren't actually threatening this particular event. They were at another event in Toronto that day.
Okay, so now I mean that they aren't like supporting Rebel Radio or Rumble, are they? Or are they? I'm pretty sure they'd probably be against.
No, and they would definitely be against Rebel News.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering because, like, with Antifa, back when I was younger, it was real cool, fucking acting all like you're an anarchist and stuff. And I always loved the idea of being an anarchist. Put that little A sign with a circle around it, and I didn't really understand what that meant until later on, especially here in the last year or so, year and a half. Me and Mark Edworthy have been doing a show together called Roger's Real Time Talk Show event, and we do roundtables and we discuss politics, like serious politics, and we talk about the history of things. One year we did United States political history as well as like just politics in general concerning those topics, and then like last year we did England, and we started discussing socialism inside of England. And what I found out was the fact that these supposed anarchists with this real utopian or with this real, free kind of attitude theology doesn't actually practice what they preach. Like you read that what their ideology is, and it doesn't match up to what they do because they are really big into regulation and trying to control people. They've actually, when they broke up back during the early days, they actually merged with the socialist parties because they couldn't survive anymore as a political party on their own. So they merged into the socialist parties in England. So when you think about anarchists, groups like Antifa, which that's what Antifa is supposed to be, just for anybody who doesn't know that, that's what they're supposed to be. They aren't what you think they are when it comes to anarchy. As a matter of fact, I would think that most people who believe what anarchy is and what it really is two different things. If they're anything like I was, because I grew up in the whole era of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and being an anarchist was cool, and you got to have funny haircuts and put a bunch of tattoos and stuff all over your body and pierce your freaking face. Cool stuff like that, Put some Knox gelatin in your hair and create freaking Liberty Spike.